Hi, friends. I hope everybody is doing well. I am coming to you with another episode for the Onyx Storm read along. And this is a compilation of thoughts for chapter 7 through chapter 18. So I've left off at chapter 19. And I've read this section of the book over a couple of days. So definitely processing thoughts from a couple of different reading sessions. Before I go ahead and dive in, the one thing that I do want to just talk about is a little bit of transparency and getting back into this place. And what I mean by that is life has been really busy, work has been busy. I am working in a full-time job still. And so this labor of love that is this podcast and these episodes, you still have to find that time for it, right? And I am not very rigid with the schedule. I don't record on certain days. I don't read on certain days. I just try to do a little bit every week. And I've tried to record enough that when I started this project and putting it out online, that I had enough episodes to where I could keep a little bit of this organic nature going, and I could still post on a regular cadence and get stuff out in a way that kept readers and hopefully fans who are listening to this satisfied in the way that I would want to be when I'm consuming content. But it's not putting a lot on me to necessarily have that rigidity. And I think it's important for me to talk about that because there may come a time where if I can continue to do this for a while and like the audience grows and, there's a good reception to all of this, where I may have to change that structure. And honestly, I look forward to if that does become the case. But why I mention all of this is because there have been times where I've just been so tired or just not in the headspace to really take in what I'm reading that I've had to stretch this section of reading over a couple of different days. And so, for example, sometimes I'll get ready for bed and then I'll just read for a little bit before I go to sleep. And usually I do that a little bit earlier, but there have been times where I've just wanted to, but it's been so late that then I'm too tired to where I'm not really fully taking in or understanding what's happening. And so I tried to read through a couple of different chapters in that headspace over a couple of nights recently. And then today was the first time where I sat down like during the day and carved out time and read a lot of the chapters. And I didn't go back and read those ones that I kind of like stumbled my way through. I think I wanted to just keep going, but I'm acknowledging that, I don't know that I was fully taking in everything in what I was reading in those first initial chapters when I picked up at chapter 7. And it's just, I feel like it's important to be transparent about it. There is a way where you could obviously be very hard on yourself when you are trying to create content. And obviously it centers around your ability to fully read and understand what's happening in these stories. But there's also this desire to just like keep going and to get the content done. And all of these things are at a constant struggle with each other. And so, I'm coming to you now having come off some really great chapters and content that I'm excited to talk about, but it can be a mishmash of a lot of different things by the time that you get to a place to have thoughts to talk about and create an episode for. And I think that it's, fine to be transparent about that. There isn't a perfect science all the time, and it's not this beautifully structured thing all the time. And that's why I'm doing this. I want there to be this honesty in this journey that like this isn't perfection. It's just about doing. It's not always going to be exactly the way that I would want it to be. But I was excited to read today and I was excited to record. So happy to be here for the second read along. And I'm excited because I know that I have more time this weekend, and I think I'm going to be able to do a couple of episodes of recording for this read along, which is both exciting and a bummer because I know that this book is going to leave off in a cliffhanger. I've seen the videos about it, and so I'm not excited for it to end because this is just yet another series where it's not going to be complete. And so we've done a read along where we have a little bit of a cliffhanger. I recognize that I laugh about it because it wasn't exactly the best choice for podcast content. But, this is just, again, these are the things I'm reading and this is what I'm enjoying right now. And I'm doing this project based off of where I'm at with those things. And so it's just, you got to laugh a little bit about it because nothing is ever going to be perfect. So I say all of that to say I was able to finally put some good time back into reading. And I want to start by talking about something I've talked about before, and it's going to maybe sound a little bit like a broken record, and I'm sure I'll bring it up again. It's kind of crazy that I'm going to say this, but it's easy to forget how enticing Rebecca's writing style is and how it makes you feel and really brings you into the story. And so my first thought when I kind of put the book down from this recent session of reading was it just continues to I guess put me in awe how you can feel so much at a time. You can feel the tension between the characters. You can feel the struggle that they feel with the situation that they're in, being in the middle of war, but also that they have real life things going on. You know, they talk about how they're feeling personally. They talk about their relationships, dynamics with family. Like it's just fraught with emotion while also they're in this place where they're, you know, fighting from this common enemy to try to defeat the Wyvern and the Venom. They're struggling with some of the people in charge on campus. There's a lot of tension between the flyers and the writers who are around and trying to learn together. Like you're feeling so many different things, and the writing allows you to experience all of that. And because I personally am very empathetic and have a big imagination, it's so easy for me to picture it all and imagine it all and put myself in their shoes. And that's what I love about a book that allows me to do that and gives me enough detail to do it. I'm feeling everything. And so at least right now, it's not that I'm necessarily putting this book down at the end of chapter 18 and am like anxious. There have been times where I've read certain parts of her books or other books where I just know that I'm leaving off at a tense time and it's going to be kind of hard to pick it back up and read it again. I'm not there with this yet, but I just recognize there's a lot happening in this world and this environment around these characters. So it's just, I admire it a lot, and her ability to be able to put people in that situation to think and feel all of those things of her characters, because it's what they're thinking and feeling. And it's really important to you, to your understanding of the story, to know and really grasp that. So I appreciate that her writing style gives me the ability to really put myself in their shoes. So what I'll say about where we are overall is a big part of this situation in these chapters is still very much Xaden living with, like, having his venomness, for lack of a better word, be part of him and navigating life with it. And what's interesting is there is a part in the beginning of this story where he isn't around that much. You know, he's shielded himself from Violet, which we know it's for part of his self-control. He's, you know, not necessarily in the same place as her. There's a period of time where he was out on the front lines, and like there was a lot of separation of them. And I actually appreciated it, because a big part of her story right now is trying to figure out how she can get information and get back out into this world and explore to figure out how to cure him of this, right? But it's also primarily to figure out Indarna's lineage, and everything she brings to the table as a dragon, amongst all the other things that are going on, right? And so there are parts where I very much miss the Xaden and Violet interaction, but also I find myself not, because I don't want him to compromise himself, because what we see very early on is these moments, which I've talked about before, where the venom takes over when he loses control. And so it's not even that he is intentionally channeling the elements from the earth or the environment. It's that when he loses control in any way of his emotions, it just is there. It's just under the surface and it happens. And so obviously the more that happens, the more he will like want to do it. And that's where the lack of control just starts to take over, to where he has no control of that want and he will do it intentionally. But right now he is putting all of that and trying to mute all of that and cage all of that, so he's not out of control. And a big part of that is distancing himself from Violet, because he wants to just like be feral with her and like love her and be physical with her and just let it all go. He doesn't want to be all buttoned up. He wants to just be his unleashed self in a lot of ways, including intimately. And he can't, because when he is his most unleashed self, especially physically and intimately, that's when he's the most vulnerable, and that's when the channeling can happen a lot. And so again, knowing that, I'm okay with the distance, because I don't want Xaden to succumb to that, right? I want him to be as far away from that temptation. And so for the first time, as much as I love the tension that their intimacy and love brings, for him as a character, right, I don't want him to be compromised. So a lot of that kind of happens towards the beginning of this book, and then very quickly into this section that I read, it doesn't take very long to where he ends up having an incident on the front lines where he alludes to in a letter to Violet where he has to like seclude himself and take a minute to himself where he is. And she reads between the lines to know that he's trying to make sure that the redness around his eyes from having channeled goes away so he can be around people again. And because a lot of people don't know, obviously, that this is happening. Only the main squad that Violet works with, which is more than enough people to make you nervous, but they're all in this trusted circle, right? And so other people don't know. And so she reads between the lines of his letter to say, like, well, if he's isolating himself, it's because he channeled again and he lost control. And part of that was in relation to news he was getting about her and people that he was with, like Garrick, being like, I've never seen him like that. And so obviously the worry is strong still. And anyway, he ends up coming back and basically like opting into this role as a teacher. And so she is like, you're safe here, and feels that it's good that he's where she is, because if he's not on the front lines, then there's less risk of him having his emotions be out of control in that type of situation and in that type of tense battle, to where when he's safe, there's more likelihood he'll be calm, right? But obviously she's there now. And so when he's where she is, there's also that risk, which is him losing his control around her. So there's been a couple of moments where they've grabbed some time together and the passion reignites very quickly, right? They kiss. It's very passionate. It's very heady. It's intimate. And then they break away from that. And it's just like they're edging each other this whole time because they can't be fully physical. And he's walking that line of getting to that place of losing control before he pulls back. And so he is fully, for lack of a better term, blue-balling himself, blue-balling her, but it's all that they can do, right? There's even a part where he says, kissing is not enough. Why would you think that that's enough for you? Because she's like, if that's all that it is, I'd rather have that than nothing. And he's like, but I know that that's not what you want. You and I don't love each other that way. We love each other in such this carnal, we want to be bare all to each other with only skin separating ourselves. And we can't do that. So me only being able to kiss you, like, it's something, but it's never going to be enough, right? And she's like, well, then it's an incentive for me to figure this out faster, right? And he still is kind of like, you believe that you can heal me? And she's like, yeah, I do. And so there's just this dynamic happening where he's struggling and she knows it, but she is his only lifeline. And so he's reaching for her. And he obviously just, the physical attraction, the protectiveness, all of this stuff is there. And the yearning is there. Like, there's just, again, a lot of different types of feelings and situations that are happening. What I find very interesting is when Violet finally gets to a place where there's a couple of things. Let me take a step back. A big part of what's happening is she feels like she needs to get her hands on as much information as possible. And because of some things and gestures that she's done in the past, some people in power are willing to give her access to their tombs and libraries and send her materials. And so those things do start to kind of slowly come in, but it's just they're not getting through it fast enough, or it doesn't quite have all of what they need so far and what they've read. And so she knows that she needs to get her dad's materials, but now it's where it's hidden is where Dane's dad is. Dane's dad is now in charge and took her late mother's post at Basgiath. And she, of course, hates this. And this guy is just such an ass. And Dane even is just not, like, nobody likes his dad, including Dane. She ends up going to Dane. And it's kind of the first, maybe second, I guess, significant time you really see him in the book. There's been a couple, I guess. But, like, with her and him specifically, where she's like, I need your help. And, like, this is what I need and whatever. And he still is willing to do it and be there for her. And there's even a moment where she says she feels she can just see this tension on his face of not yearning, but just torture when he looks at her a little bit. And it's brief, but it's like you can just tell that he feels bad. And so he's going to forever be this guy that will do whatever he can to help her and to be there for her. And she recognizes it, but like he's just only ever going to be this friend. And there's going to be a little bit of distance, but yet she's trying to trust him, right? So she goes to him with this ask because only somebody in the Atos line can get into this house now and whatever. And so she has to have him do it. He ultimately does. He gets the book. She gets it. And when she starts to read this information from her dad, there's a couple of chapters where talking about getting the material from her dad, and then she gets it and like reading text from him. There's just a part of me, how do I want to say this? I never thought that her brother was alive before we know that Brennan is alive. And as it got closer to it being Brennan, I'd have to think back, but I don't think that I was even able to read between the lines then of like really seeing that coming. And so there are moments where I'm reading this text where I've thought, is her dad also going to be alive? And I'm pretty strongly confident that it's not the case. I think, we obviously know her mother has passed. That was seen and experienced in the book. There's no way around that. We saw it with our own eyes, for lack of a better way to put that. But with her father, there's just something that makes me feel like either he is, or there's something that's going to come to life with him in a really, really big way. And I think her having this book and getting this research from him is the beginning of that, of how big of a part he's going to play. He's always played a huge part in her life, but I think it's going to continue to really evolve into something pretty powerful. And so it's pretty touching to see her reading those texts, and like, they talk about her emotion that she's feeling as she's reading the note from him at the beginning of the book, how she wants to only read one line a day so that way she can make it last, but also she just has to read the whole thing right now, the whole letter, because she needs to get the information so quickly, right? Just being at this impasse and being torn with her feelings. And I think that it's important that they are taking the time to flesh that out and share that with you, because it's still her grief, right? Like, that's a very big part of what she's experiencing, even when it comes to her mother, the interactions that she has with people who speak about her mother or were involved in the situation with her mother passing. There's a lot of tension and grief there, but she's pushing through for the sake of all of the others that are around still and alive in these missions that she has. But I like how you can switch from this like tension with Xaden in certain situations or classrooms or whatever, and then in the next scene she's getting this book from Sloane and she's with Ree to try and open it, and you just feel this grief in a different way. It's, again, to be able to mold from a class where you're learning things and you're using signets and you're basically like battling for the sake of education, plus the tension of her being with her love, and then going into this situation of grief. It's just so complex, and you're just going through this story so effortlessly, folding from one scene and emotion to the next, and it's very intense. So there's a lot of strong feelings in the air, right? And now when she reads this letter from her dad, she's even more reinforced that she needs to go to the South, and she basically tells Xaden, like, this is what we need to do and we need to make it happen. And so I've left off at a part where they're going to really dive into that. But what is also really interesting is when she first gets this book, she can't open it. And there's a note that talks about like your first love. And she's thinking through, like, is it my dad's first love, Lilith? Well, no. Is it me? No. Like, she's thinking through how, like, my dad would want me to overthink this. The first answer would be the easiest, and that's not what he would want. She's trying to put herself in the shoes of what his education would be. And she even thinks back to her own like first love, and she's like, there's no way in hell. And I remember that when I read that, because it's only like a chapter or two before this interaction I'm about to talk about, I was like, I don't feel like I remember her talking about anybody else besides Dane. I may be misremembering. It's been a while since I read Fourth Wing. Like, I don't remember all of what was brought up or talked about, but I feel like Dane was always the first love that we were introduced to. And she may allude to the fact that, like, she's had other interests before, but I don't remember a lot of talk about it. It was just pretty immediately Dane and Xaden, and you hit the ground running with all of that, right? So she mentions this briefly, and she's like, no, it's not him. And then in a scene where they're in this class with Xaden doing these, battle practices and whatever, the prince walks in, or one of them, I should say, and he ends up having affection for her. And again, it could just be because I put down the book for a minute and I don't remember, but it very quickly is apparent that they dated and that there was a thing. And Ree was like, how have you never mentioned this before? And she's like, well, why would I? Like, it was, I think she says it was like 4 years ago or 5 years ago. It didn't matter. Like, he cheated. He was exactly who everybody said that he was. And so whatever, like, it didn't matter. I'm with Xaden now, whatever. And so you just start to realize that there's this interesting dynamic of somebody else being quite powerful, at least politically, who you have just all these men, powerful men who either hate or love Violet. You have Xaden, obviously, who is a lethal weapon. You have Dane, who is powerful in his own ways, but also somewhat of a gentle, maybe slightly confused soul, but he's finding his way. And then you have this prince, and it's like, I don't know what his powers are, but politically, right? He has a lot of influence. And I'm very interested to see what role he does or doesn't play and how that kind of comes to life. And he even was like, let's have dinner. Let me properly apologize to you. And he knows that she loves Xaden, even though she says, like, we're not together because we're following the code of conduct, which Xaden's like, well, we are together, but whatever. We want to say we're not because I'm a teacher and you're a cadet, like, fine. You know, she makes it clear she's not available and whatever. I'm just interested to see where this is going. I'm interested to see if he ends up staying a pain in the ass or if he really does become a true ally. So there's some different stuff that's happening. And I'm interested in this because it's a different wrinkle. Like, the Dane has always been there. And even now, in these few chapters, when Violet tells Xaden, like, I recruited Dane to help me with this and he got the book or whatever, I forget how she said it, but Xaden's like, when you say Dane and this phrase in the same sentence, like, that's never a good thing, as if he still has his guard up a little bit about Dane's proximity to her or help with her, even though he knows that Dane is not a threat anymore. He still is like, you care for her in a way that you will never have. So, like, I'm not a fan of yours, right? The protectiveness that Xaden has, and that's fine, and that makes sense. But there's a new element with this guy being around now. And I'm interested to see if he ends up being on her side and how this all kind of comes to life and what that means for Xaden. I know that this struggle is going to continue for Xaden. They just continue to talk about how he has these little slip-ups, but it's like there is an underlying barometer of how each little slip-up is adding more and more to this venonness. I think in my mind originally, I was thinking that if he just, like, stepped away and did isolate himself and let it go away and exerted control, that little barometer would kind of shrink again, and, like, you would just have this little notch of venonness, and it's almost like a heat thermometer. Like, it may spike for a minute, but it would just kind of come back down. But I am almost, my gut tells me that that's not the case. My gut tells me that every time he wields, even accidentally, that little venom thing ticks up one more. And so there's going to come a point where she's either going to cure him or they're going to hit an edge, right? And there's going to be a tipping point where something's going to give. And so I think that's, if I had to guess, I have thoughts about where this book is going to leave off and what that's going to mean. And I know it's going to be pretty rough. So all that I can hope for is that she's able to get information about Andarna that is really, really meaningful, and that they're able to have a leg up in this war, and that is the priority, and that Xaden's venonness is still very much something she's against, but I have a feeling it's kind of one and the same. The mission is kind of one and the same, but it's going to kind of end up probably being a backseat to where, like, there's going to be only so much she's going to be able to do. And what's really interesting about this is what she tells Xaden about the experience when she was out on the front lines, which now not everybody knows about the experience, but they know about the learning, which is that Venin can wield. They have signets. She was out there with a female Venin, and they call them different things depending on how much, like, power they have or how senior they are. She can wield lightning. And so there are just these hints of things when these Venin talk that make you feel like the way in which Venin are made is very similar to what happens when the threshing happens and when people are chosen by dragons. It feels like there's some through line, like you have two sides of the same coin, that you have this evil with the Venin, but then you have this, like, threshing with people, where because they both can have signets and, like, powers and how they're connected and this magic, there's something going on there to where it almost feels like it could be by design. Like, there's something happening in the background that this female Venin and these Venin that are coming after Violet know about. They want Andarna, they want her, like, they're very aware of her and this power and what it can do for them that we are still not clear on. There's something happening that is going to be connected between the two, and it's going to come to an impasse. And so what I'm already kind of processing, even now in this recording, is that I'm starting to accept that I know that things are not going to go great with Xaden, But all that I can hope is that they make progress with the Venom. And what I have a feeling is it's all going to come to a head, and that's where this book is going to leave off. That the next one is going to be kind of the final and last reckoning of the way that it all shakes out. So I don't think that this war is going to be over and that they're going to figure their way through, and that the last piece of this and whatever this book is, if this fourth book that comes is the last, is just going to be like saving Xaden. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that things are either going to get exponentially worse or they're going to make some type of progress, but the full battle and war isn't going to be over, and that's going to be this last book. And part of me understands it a little bit, but is also quite frustrated by it, because if you think about it, you think that they could kind of speed up this whole research and education and learning and go find these things and make shit happen and go fight these people and whatever, and that you could do that. But what you're really realizing is, even in the book when they say, well, you only have 6 months to go on this expedition or whatever, or 7 months to figure out what the hell's up with Andarna and find her people, and Violet's like, fuck, I thought we'd at least have a year. I was like, well, damn, that's a long ass time. But to Violet, she's saying, well, 6 months isn't that long. You get grounded in the fact of how long all of this is stretching out over. We're not talking about just a couple of weeks here. I mean, even when I left off on chapter 19, at the end of 18, the first couple lines of 19, because I obviously saw it in the book, was like 4 days later. Like, things aren't happening that fast. You skip a week at a time, or like a couple days go by. Like, this is a longer period of time, which it might sound crazy for me to say that, because obviously I know subconsciously that these stories are happening over a long period of time. But when you really think about how fast you wish answers would come and things would get resolved versus the reality of how long this struggle has been for them. I mean, it's been months, it's been years. Like, they've been going through this struggle since the beginning of Fourth Wing till now, for not that long, but also a while. And so at the same time, and so I guess the point that I'm making is that you have to, as much and as fast as I want things to go, you have to kind of wrap it in the reality of like how slow war can be sometimes, and how long it can take to do certain things, and respect the fact that the research isn't going to be ready in 5 minutes. And so I'm trying to pace myself with all of this, and I'm saying all that because I look at this book and I know that I'm maybe a fourth of the way through, and I'm looking at how much is left, and yet how it just seems like she's starting to get answers, and I'm like, just go, just explore, like, get the information you need. But all this stuff is going to take months to do, and then even when they have the knowledge, there's probably going to be some education of how to use it and what it means and the outcome and the impact. And there's just, I think I'm trying to mentally give myself a pep talk for how much there's left that we have to go through. There's a lot of ground that's left to cover here, and I'm both excited by that and frustrated by it. So I already can tell you, I'm sure even later today I'm going to probably read again. I'm sure I'll record tomorrow, or even later tonight. Like, there's so much that's going to happen, and I'm very excited to read through it, but I don't want it to come to an end so soon. But I'm excited for all of this, yet it just feels like not enough, and like there's not enough time, but yet it's all going to take so much time to get through. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm just feeling a lot of feelings, and that's what these stories do. That's why Rebecca's so good. There's a way of making you feel like you're a kid again when you're reading it, but also there's a lot of obviously adult material and struggle that's happening. And so you're at odds with all of these thoughts and feelings all the time. And to me, that is what makes for a good story. So I'm getting really excited to get through it. I'm excited to think about where I'm going to pick up next for a read-along series. I think I have a really good selection that I'm going to carve out time for, potentially 2 really good selections that I can really make a lot of good progress in the fall for. And we're going to stay in this fantasy realm for a while. And I hope that people are interested in that and are okay with that, because these are the books that I have at my disposal and at the ready to read. I'm going to start a new series. Like, we got a lot of runway, and I'm really excited about it, especially for the fall and winter seasons. So this is where I'm going to leave you for this second episode of the read-along series for Onyx Storm. Again, with these episodes, and I should have said this at the beginning, I'm not here to recap the exact story for you. I'm just processing what I've read in hopes that you've also read the exact same chapters that I have. Even if you read more or a few less, I think you can hopefully identify with some of what I'm feeling or have reactions to what I'm feeling to say yes and or yes but or hear you but I don't quite agree. Like, it's all about creating this dialogue as readers, right? And that's what the comments in YouTube are for, is to be able to kind of create this community of like, I really felt it when you said this, or I understand how you can't even quite articulate all of your feelings. Like, there's just so much. Like, I just hope that there's enough there to relate to, and also, again, like, have enough context to create dialogue. So just still really appreciative of everybody who's listening. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, connect to any of the other social channels that I have. At minimum at this point, it's going to be Instagram. Please just stay plugged in and connected, and I hope that these are things that you look forward to and exciting listens as you read along in these stories. Or if you're thinking about reading a book, it's going to be a little bit spoilery, but maybe you can listen and then go into read chapters and let me know if you felt something different. I'm just interested to know how people are consuming this content. Are you really reading with me and then listening to it, or is it a pre-read, or have you not read these books in a long time and it's bringing you back, making you want to read them again, or you're having dialogue about it now? Like, any and all of whatever process everybody is going through with these, I'm interested in hearing it and learning about it. So thank you all again for being here and for following along. Really excited for what's to come, and so glad that you were here for this series. So until next time, friends.